how your brain actually creates habits and how your brain subconsciously creates the not so good habits and how you can try and break them to create the better habits you want or the better programming that you need. So it's actually a scientific principle. It's neuroscience, which is how anything that we're conditioned to, right, becomes a natural response. Anything we're conditioned to now starts to become our natural way of performing, our natural way of executing, because this is just what we know. For example, when you have to pick up a glass of water, right? Do you pick it up with the rim facing your mouth, or do you pick it up with the rim on the opposite end, like upside down? You pick it up with the rim facing your mouth. Now you think that's because that's logic. But the reason you actually do it that way is because when you were a child and the first time you picked up a glass, you watched how other people did it. And you picked it up maybe sideways, you picked it up upside down. Take tying your shoelaces, for example. That's the easiest example, right? When tying your shoelaces, the reason how you know how to tie them is because someone showed you how they tie their shoelaces. Someone showed you to tie your shoelaces and you practiced it over and over and over again. You guys want to know one really uncomfortable truth about our relationships, our past patterns, our traumas, our dysfunctional, sequences that we've had with triggers, relationships, everything? We actually keep practicing them. We keep repeating them because that's what we've been so conditioned to do. That's what we know best. Monkey see, monkey do, monkey practice multiple times, now monkey does without thinking. That's basically us. We practiced it once, we practiced it twice. So here's what's crazy. Even if you want love, even if you want peace, even if you want good relationships, even if you want good communication, even if you want to be seen and heard, even if you want all those things, if what you know how to do so well does not match those things, you won't get it. That's the uncomfortable truth of where you need to reprogram your subconscious. Why? Because your subconscious will train you, will guide you, will push you, will encourage you, will lead you to keep doing what you know best. And what you know best is what you've done multiple times before, even if it wasn't quote unquote good, even if it wasn't quote unquote happy. So next week, I'm actually going to take you deep into the subconscious aspect of how we've created these patterns and how we've created these habits and how to break out of them. But what I want to ask all of you right now, so I want you to sit for a second and think, what is one habit right now that you would like to change for yourself? And you know what, I will go first and I will show you, and I'll lead with vulnerability so that you get the opportunity to see that I'm also hurting and I also want to be able to share something and work through it. One belief or pattern or habit I want to change is I want to break out of the need for me to prove myself. That's what I really want to own up to. You have taken the ownership of being able to recognize where in your life you need change. Now, I'm going to ask you some seriously important motherfucking questions around what you just shared. Okay? So let's think about what we shared for a moment that we wanted to change, right? For me, it was needing to prove myself. For some of you said that, you wanted to change how other people saw you. For some of you said it was a habit of certain things. Now, let me ask you question number one. At any point through this, if you identify with it, raise your hand, okay? Have you at any point experienced shame around this feeling of whatever you want to change? Yes? Okay, hand down. Have you beaten yourself up around that when you felt that shame? Raise your hand up if you felt yes. Okay. Now, when you felt that feeling of shame, have you felt low? Have you felt fatigued? Have you felt triggered? Have you felt insecure? Raise your hand if you felt that. Put your hands up. Okay. Now, big question. When you were in this moment, where you felt this, like, this feeling of this belief that overtook you, or this like programming that overtook you, do you feel like you were unattractive? Raise your hands up if you believe that. And raise my hands up. Okay. So already you can see how just living and functioning in that belief is putting out a lower vibration than we actually have just when we're fucking neutral, just when we're normal, just when we're not even thinking about things. So somehow this thing that we're thinking of and attempting in some way to want to do better or feel better or whatever is actually decreasing. our state of being. It's what's bringing us closer to being triggered. It's what's inducing shame upon us. It's what's making us feel like we're less valuable or less lovable to people. And so ultimately, here's the big question. If we're in this space where we're feeling this shame, when we're feeling this trigger, when we're feeling the guilt from this, do you really think that you can have the abundance you really want? Do you really think that you can have the love you really want? Do you really think that you can create good connection? Do you really think you can manifest success? No. So here's the craziest thing I want to tell you. It isn't even about your habit as much as it is how you feel around that habit. It isn't even about your habit as much as how much you depend on that habit. It isn't even about your habit as much as it is about your vibration that gets lowered when you're in that habit. Take, for example, someone who enjoys playing music, right? On one hand, you can have someone who takes that same power of playing music, adds discipline, structure, etc. around it, and can make that same attribute a huge success. His career, he can make records, or she can participate in it, she can sing her kids to sleep, she can make it something valuable. On the other hand, when you have someone who takes that same thing of music and uses it as a coping mechanism, something to run away from responsibility, something to run away from trauma or pain or whatever they're going through, or maybe just as a reason to abandon their discipline or their self-love. And so this person just sits outside playing music all day, instead of trying to make it lucrative, instead of trying to perform their functions. They've taken the same thing, which is their love of music. But the way they feel, the way they view it, the way they've constructed their life around it is totally different. It's the same thing about connection. It's the same thing about love. It's the same thing about money. It's the same thing about habits of waking up. It's anything. It's about what we make that believe it can be for us. Now, I'm going to ask you a really, really big question. And this is what we do in the gauntlet. This is the type of questions that I'm going to ask you in the gauntlet. I don't ask too many of these because you're going to be in a state where you have to sit with that deep work. So I'm going to ask you one of those questions, just one. Let's go back to that habit, that shame, that whatever we picked on, right? So for me, for example, is need to prove myself. Other people, someone said it was, me not feeling worthy. Can each of you see where in your past this came from, to the point that maybe it was a mechanism, maybe it was a shame, maybe it was a judgment, maybe it was because of a trigger, maybe it was because of an idea that all came from your childhood or a parent or your conditioning? Raise your hands if you're able to see that. Okay, beautiful. Now, for a lot of you, you may not be able to see it right now because for very long, you may not even have done that type of work. You may not have done that type of like discovery or introspection where you can go all the way back to see, okay, where did this first come from? So let me give you a piece of homework. For those of you who perhaps were not able to see it came back from that time, I want you to do a process that I do and I take people through in the gauntlet called compassionate inquiry. And this is the process. This is a psychoanalysis method that I use to help someone find out where their trauma first came from. Now, we all talked about how this habit, this like belief, this whatever makes us feel like shame, it makes us feel judgment, it makes us beat up on ourselves. So we can say that in truth, we're unconsciously re-traumatizing ourselves each time that we go through it. So we need to find out when it first started and find a way to address that, soothe that, nurture that, nourish that, fix that, and kick that in the butt and get it out of there. So this process is for you to keep going backwards. Whenever you find that you talk about this habit, you ask yourself, when did I last experience it? So let me take myself for example, my need to prove myself. When did I last experience that feeling of needing to prove myself, which led me feel so triggered and judged and disvalued myself? For me, it happened last night. It was in a conversation with, a friend, my girlfriend's mom, actually, who's sitting outside. But it was in a conversation about needing to show how I can be more safe and secure. And so I'm needing to prove myself to a point where I found that I was trying to validate certain parts of me, even unconsciously trying to project certain, things and experiences I've gone through, etc., because I want someone else to be able to trust me. And so unconsciously, I was abandoning myself to prove to someone else that I was good enough and valuable and worthy. Now I ask myself, okay, when's the last time it happened before that? Now, then the last time before that. Then I slowly go back to, when can I remember doing this when I was really young? So let's say it's around money. Someone has this story around money, right? Like where, I know, Caitlin, you brought this up and it was a really beautiful story because money is this really interesting for me. It's just a life enhancer. It's just a means for exchange. That's all to me money really is. But I can view it as being an insecure way of exchange, which means I'll never have enough, or I can view it in an abundant way of exchange, which means I'll always have enough. And so then I can have everything I truly want in my life. But where do I get the idea about that? And then if I can go back and way into my childhood, I can recognize, wow, this really comes from when I was a kid. And my mom was like, raising, maybe she was a single mom, raising 5 of us. And she said, don't spend on this, don't spend on this, we'll never have enough. Don't waste this, we'll never have enough. Or on the opposite, where my father perhaps just constantly spent willy-nilly. Maybe he was a gambler, maybe even we had a lot of money and we lost it because there wasn't enough for structure, discipline, or more importantly, a belief of worth around it. Every single one of your stories that you brought up, every single one of your habits that you want to change, one massive fucking tool can change it. And that is improving your sense of self-worth. Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.